I'm about to look.
You did it first. Am I talking to you or am I talking to them?
I don't know.
You talk to them.
One eye that way, one eye this way.
Welcome to the Mental Health Awareness Month series that we are doing. This is the first of 5 episodes coming to you every Friday of October. Really looking forward to it. My name is Theron, this is Mark.
Hi everyone,
And-
great to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, pleasure. First time. It's the first episode. It's not again. Okay, this series, Riding the Waves, Navigating Mental Health Through COVID. Appropriate topic? I'm pretty sure it is. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, of course, so we're doing this series as a way of trying to bring some awareness to mental health. This has been a rising conversation in the last couple of years, but definitely in the last, 18 months to 2 years because of COVID. So we'd love to be part of this conversation and to do our part to destigmatize some of the dynamics around mental health, to really shine a spotlight on it, help everybody to understand the reality of the situation, the context, and to normalize it. I know for myself, I've definitely dealt with a whole lot of mental health dynamics over the last year and a half. I'm sure the same is for you, and we'll get to that in a minute. But to normalize it, because this is a dynamic in our lives that we're all dealing with, have been for a while, and will be for the foreseeable future. The other thing is to educate. We're in the emotional intelligence space. We develop EQ as a company, and we're really wanting to tie these two together for people, for them to understand the role of emotional intelligence in helping us with our mental health. Let's dive in. Okay, so who is this series for? Mark, is it for you? Is it for me? Is it for, what does this picture mean? I've got here a manager, I think, and an office team. You can see the one guy's a bit dejected and the boss is losing his mind. This is a series for anyone. As I say, all of us are going through these things, but particularly for people in a work context, for teams and team leaders. Let's look back. Mark, do you remember a time pre-COVID?
I mean, we were chatting about it earlier. It feels simultaneously like a couple of weeks ago. And at the same time, I think you said it's a billion years ago.
Yeah.
It feels like forever ago and a second ago at the same time.
Yeah. When we started COVID, however long ago it was, we did a webinar series, you and I. We did it for 6 weeks, every single day. You weren't involved in all of it, but it was a long season of looking every single day at these dynamics. I think the series was called Mental Health and Wellbeing in COVID-19. We committed to doing 2 weeks or 21 days or whatever the first lockdown was going to be. Ended up being 6 weeks of running every day. And at that point, no one was talking about mental health really. I mean, there were maybe a couple of people, but everyone was talking about physical health. I don't know if you remember just all the information around how to avoid the virus. Wash your hands for 20 seconds. And at the time, we stepped into that gap and we said, guys, yeah, great, let's be concerned about physical health, but the mental health wave is going to hit us. And we've now had wave after wave of COVID and wave after wave of emotional psychological stress.
Something that stood out to me then was we were projecting into the future about what might be the impact in terms of mental health. And now I think we'll touch on it today.
Yeah.
Some of the studies have started coming out just showing like it's been an absolute dog show.
Well, let's look at some of these stats from the early days. So when we started this, these are the stats we actually spoke about. Can you walk us through these stats quickly around mental health?
Yeah, I mean, this is from South Africa, just showing that, 1 in 4 people, so that's a quarter. I mean, if you think of whoever you're working with, family and friends who work, 1 in 4 is 25%, either have or will suffer from depression in some shape or form. And this is huge. I mean, this is 25% of people that are really struggling with problematic mood dynamics. And I think it's because life is tough. Even before COVID hit, people were struggling.
Now, this is framed in terms of the workforce. Talk to us about this, the cost.
Yeah, I mean, this is that IDEA study, and I mean, 232 billion rand each year just on depression in South Africa. And part of
that's what it costs the economy.
Yeah, I mean, these are obviously estimates, but I mean, what they're speaking to here, and it's, I think we touch on it later, the World Economic Forum, punts depression as being one of the top, if not the top.
Here it is.
There we go.
Go for it.
Causes of ill health and disability. And I mean, why would, depression be considered workplace disability?
Or even your workplace.
Exactly.
Why the stress on workplace?
Exactly.
We tend to think of that as a personal kind of problem. Like,
Yeah.
leave your problems at home. It's time to be professional.
Yeah.
But they're actually labeling it as a work place disability.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is the way it just shuts you down. It shuts down your ability to think and process information effectively. I think all of the research points to how, a depressed mood is going to depress one's ability to be productive. And again, this was pre-COVID. I mean, look at that, World Economic Forum in 2018. And now we're sitting, obviously, in a reality, a few months or a couple of years down the line, and I think things have been exacerbated.
Yeah. Okay, back to our early webinar series that we did. We asked you a question, perhaps if you saw those episodes, but even if you didn't, we asked the world a question. We said, who are you going to be? Who are you going to be on the other side of this lockdown? As I said, initially I think it was just 21 days. Was that right?
Yeah,
I think it would be 3 weeks or something.
Yeah, it was Cyril's announcement, 21 days, here we
and
go.
And everyone came up with these 21-day challenges, 21 days of cooking something cool, and 21 days of art, or there were all these challenges because we thought, okay, here's a chance to be forced to stay home. Let's make an adventure out of it. And then, as I say, it dragged on and it dragged on. And that question of who are you going to become? Well, now we're a decade later, or however long it's been. Who have we become? Who have we become? Because we were looking at some of the research that was predicting what would happen, and we'll deal with a bit of that as we go through the rest of the series. But are you, like you can see these little stick figures, are you like the guys on the left, or are you like the guys on the right? I don't think there are many people at all who are like, John Travolta's Saturday Night Briefcase Fever there on the right. Everyone is exhausted and everyone is feeling the pressure.
Something that happened actually in lockdown, I remember, I mean, we were all part of those conversations, is this thrust, the 21-day challenges that you're mentioning, to use the opportunity to learn a new skill or do a new thing or spend time with your family. And I think that actually just put a whole lot of pressure on people, caused a huge amount of shame for those who were feeling exhausted and
still couldn't speak Spanish 21 days
still couldn't
later.
speak Spanish. Yeah. And it's just gone on and on to the point where now it's actually led to a very different kind of reality, and it's quite a sobering one, where I think we're all realizing this wasn't just going to be a 21-day hiatus from our normal life. It actually is going to lead to a new and very different kind of world for all of us.
And a different kind of work world.
Yeah.
I mean, so my next slide here, who have we become in the collective? We might share just now some of the dynamics we've struggled with here at Migro in our team, but who have you in the collective? So if you imagine that word we, for you and your team, who have we become? What's happened to the relationships with your colleagues? You used to play backgammon every lunch break with Richard, or whatever you used to do. That's no longer happening. You tried it on Zoom for a week, and
now Richard won't turn his video on Zoom.
Richard's been retrenched.
Don't laugh about that. No, just something you prompted in my thinking was just how, with all of the clients that we're working with, we're quite open about it at Migro, but we're just hearing that, people are disheveled, companies are limping, and not economically. It's obvious the economic ramifications, but it's the psychosocial factors, mental health factors.
Well, let's go there for you, Mark. How are you doing? Keep it brief though, because both you and I can moan forever about our hard lives. But how are you? What has this been like for you?
Yeah, I think I've had quite an interesting journey through COVID, the lockdowns, the impact on Migro as a company. I've got the privilege, I think, of being interested in some of the theory around mental health, well-being, etc., knowing a lot of the practices that one would need to do. And I've been alarmed at how radically difficult it's been for me to maintain my own mental health and well-being through this lockdown. In my home context, things were exacerbated, obviously, by us having a little boy just a year ago, my wife and I, Robert. But being locked in has led to certain quite unique things that we've needed to face in our family context. I'm a little more extroverted, so not being able to actually engage with people on a constant basis has left me feeling a little bit thin in terms of energy levels. Wanting to have family and friends around to meet this new little bundle of joy has been a challenge. So we've brought him up kind of on our own in isolation, which I'm sure many people can relate to. I've started noticing that some of my coping mechanisms, and I hope we'll chat about that a bit later, but some of the coping mechanisms I've chosen, watching Netflix a lot, that extra glass of wine that, I start at 4 o'clock because now, of course, I work at home, those things I think have just led to a tardiness in terms of some of the practices that lead to mental health and well-being for me. And I started noticing, increased exhaustion, depressed mood, quite apart from just the difficult reality of, is our business going to stay alive? Are we going to be able to survive as a family? Is our little boy going to grow up in a way where he can, read more than just the top half of people's faces, And so I think there's been a lot of practical realities. I often think of going out shopping. Thank heavens for Checkers 60/60 delivery, for groceries, because you go to Pick n Pay and you think, I just want a cucumber, and now who's touched it, and am I going to get COVID, and then will that leave my family?
Well, what's interesting is I've actually become almost numb to the physical fear of it. For a long time last year, I was quite anxious about COVID. I'm asthmatic, and I was thinking, am I going to leave my 3 children, destitute? Am I going to turn my wife into a widow? I just got tired of that.
Yeah.
So, while yes, I should be thankful I'm not feeling that anxiety in that same way, I'm still feeling other anxiety. And in fact, my anxieties have grown in many ways. The impact of COVID in every single aspect of my life has had an emotional impact. We were actually chatting earlier about how my mood swings over the last 18 months have been almost a new experience for me. I've been on this roller coaster where I've not had the same kind of control or emotional regulation as I used to think that I had. So yeah, it's been tough. And one of the other big things I know that you have talked about in the past, and I experienced as well, and I think many leaders, many senior leaders, in fact not just leaders, I think parents as well, decision fatigue. Even just how am I gonna, like my family wants to see me, but they've got a different view of COVID than I have, and how do I navigate that?
Yeah.
I'm so sick and tired of needing to decide and then pivot. Oh, now there's a new wave of COVID, a new wave of trauma, a new stacking of all of these layers. It's just exhausting.
I don't know if this is throwing you in the deep end, but I'd love you to share that moment that happened when, I think it was Clayton O'Reilly or someone came in.
Yeah, like it was a while back. It was not even that long into COVID, probably 6 months in. I was trying to work from home, and kids were all being homeschooled by my poor wife. I hardly had anything to do with homeschooling. She carried that whole load. But they come and interrupt me all through the day. It's impossible to put the boundaries in. And I was in a meeting with my team, and my son came in, and I didn't lose it. Like, I wasn't shouting at him, but I was like, I can't talk to you right now. Please just leave me. I'm in a meeting. And I pushed him out, and I could see the crestfallenness in his face. And then I just back to my Zoom call, and then I just burst into tears. And I was like, I can't keep doing this. I can't feel like a failure as a dad, and I can't keep dropping the ball with my team. And Shane, my team was a little concerned. Very compassionate.
We were okay with that stuff at Migro. We were okay with it.
Anyway, and I think, even as you say that, we're okay with that. In fact, we're more than okay with that. We value that. And I think many places aren't like that. Many workplaces are, no, put your professional face on, and if you can't, then don't turn your camera on. So it's been tough, and we've had that kind of insight into a lot of our clients. We work quite closely with certain key people, many people in HR, with many of our clients, and we hear the stories. People are struggling. People are really struggling. Okay, but let's stop talking subjective and qualitative. Let's start looking at some facts here. I'm just going to quickly run through. I've got a couple of different contexts, some US studies, some UK study, and some South African study. In America, the APA, the American Psychological Association, commissioned this study, Stress in America 1 year later. They said that as a result of COVID, 61% of people have had unwanted weight gain. And you'll see why coming out just now. 61%. 67% of people trouble with sleep, either too little or too much sleep, not getting the sleep they need and they want. 23% turn to alcohol as a way of coping with the stress, and a 48% increase in stress felt by parents. I think that's a typo. I think it's very possibly 84% is what it's supposed to say. I'm a parent. I don't know how anyone could not have had an increase in stress, but 48% said that they had experienced an increase in stress. Okay, Jumping on, according to the impact of COVID on our mental health, broken down by generations, this is a fascinating spectrum here. We can see that, generally speaking, with a little bit of a glitch between millennials and Gen X, the younger you are, the more impacted you've been psychologically. You see some of these old timers here on the right. Life maybe hasn't changed very much for them. They haven't been impacted as much, and perhaps they don't have the same kind of awareness, so they're not going to tick a survey box to say yes. Maybe that's part of it as well. But in terms of Gen Z, so essentially teenagers, they're saying 46% of them self-reported an increase in mental health issues, but everybody's dealing with it. As you can see here, millennials and Gen X, that's most of the people in our workforce. Many of our leaders are impacted.
Sure.
A percentage of them have been impacted that way. Okay, jumping to the UK. This is fascinating. These numbers might not look very different, but this is essentially almost a 33% increase from 20 to 29% of clinically significant psychological distress. This is a longitudinal study that was done pre-COVID up to the height of their lockdown in April 2020. So it's pretty old, but the impact of being stuck at home, the impact of that whole season, had a dramatic increase on psychological distress.
Okay, so this is now starting to radically impact on a person's ability to actually just function in their life, and that's right at the beginning, for many countries.
Yeah.
So I think that's very interesting.
Okay, moving on. Let's just quickly work through some South African stats. Just wanted to say, this is not the largest cohort study. I haven't been able to find very much in the South African context. I think because our country has pretty much come to a standstill over the last 18 months, and whatever studies are being done have either been hamstrung or are going to come out in a year's time, and we'll know some more. But Pharma Dynamics, big pharmaceutical company, they put this report together, and they say that in terms of coping mechanisms, 81% of people who filled in their survey, it was about 1,200 people, said that they'd turned to unhealthy eating as a way of coping. Might explain in that American stat, the unwanted weight gain. 20% turned to alcohol, a little bit lower than the States, but if we hadn't had our alcohol prohibition on sales here in South Africa, I think that would be a lot higher, as well as the smoking at 18%. And then 22% said that they had turned to medication, anxiety meds, depression medication, to deal with the stress, the dynamics of COVID. 52% of people trouble sleeping. 20% of parents say that there's been an increase in their quarreling. Again, feels quite low. 49% feel anxious. 49%. That's half the population are feeling anxious. And this one's chilling. 6% have contemplated suicide.
Sure.
6% might not sound like a lot, but when it comes to ending your own life and contemplating that, that's a high number.
Well, that's 6 in 100. Just think of people in your company.
And in certain contexts, that number's about to be higher or lower. So in your context, it could be a lot higher. I think for me, what sums it up is this: that according to the people who went through this survey, there has been a 56% increase in stress levels in the South African population. I think if you add all of this together, add all of these data points, all of this research from around the world, for me, the best way to spell COVID is S-T-R-E-S-S. Now, stress is a bit of a mystical thing that we think we understand, and it's not something that you can actually see in someone's body, but there are physiological dynamics. You're a psychologist, you deal with mostly organizations and understanding dynamics. Talk to us about stress. What is it?
Well, T, I think we've both been involved in a lot of the research around stress. There's a whole lot of different models used to explain it. One of the more prominent ones is this transactional model of stress. And it works according to a few interesting things. The first is that this process of appraisal happens. You view a stressor, if you like, in a certain way. And as you appraise this stress, what happens simultaneously is there are these two processes that happen. Primary appraisal is having a look at, is this, what kind of stress is this? Is it there going to be harm to me or loss? Is it a threat or is it a challenge? Of course, if it's a challenge or something exciting, one might not experience it as being what we would typically call stressful in the negative sense, in kind of a downward spiral. And so we have this primary appraisal. Then there is what's called secondary appraisal, which is how can I cope with this? What have I got at my disposal to be able to deal with this stressor? And depending on that secondary appraisal, that then leads to this process of reappraisal. What's really important to see about this is that if we don't have coping mechanisms that are going to help us to overcome this stressor in an adequate way, it literally leads to a downward spiral. That stressor becomes more and more stressful. And that's quite a powerful thing to understand about stress. I would say that another important handle for us to have on stress theoretically is just what it's doing to us internally. Now, I've practiced this a few times. Are you ready for it? There is a thing called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Can you believe it?
Too many words.
Yeah. It's this axis made up of three things. The hypothalamus in the brain, that's like the thermostat of the brain. The pituitary gland, which is, I like to think of it as the bartender of the brain. It kind of mixes the different chemicals that our brain is going to kind of send out to the body. And then the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands, I think they're on the kidneys. Is that right?
Yeah.
Kidney, liver. I always get those chicken liver, chicken kidney,
Okay, first the kidney or the chicken or the egg or the liver.
So these adrenal glands, there's actually two parts of them. Most of us are familiar with,
Okay, but what happens? What happens with all of these things?
So you come across a stressor, you're walking along in your life and you come across a lion in the bush, okay? Or COVID. And the adrenal medulla or medulla, or whatever it is, the inside of those adrenal glands, they start releasing adrenaline. And adrenaline is really helpful to run now, to get out of here right now. So all of the muscle resources we need to get out of there.
The flee reaction.
Fight, flight, flee, yeah, okay. So that's adrenaline. We're all familiar with that. What we aren't so familiar with is the adrenal cortex, the outside, releases cortisol, the stress hormone. And what that's meant to do is help us to run fast so that we keep running. So you don't just run 5 meters from the lion, then stop and it's now over and then it chomps you. You actually get away far enough. But unfortunately, with many of the stresses in our life, we don't run away far enough. Some of us don't even run. The physical benefits of stress. And so that cortisol starts becoming quite toxic for us.
So what happens then after 18 months, 2 years, 16 years, 27 decades of COVID?
Yeah, 27 decades. I mean, what I think is vital for us to understand is there is this connection that seems to exist between the heart and the brain. There's a few very interesting responses that an inconsistent heartbeat gives in terms of mental health. Roland McCraty is one of the researchers at the Institute of Heart Math, and he was sharing that more than 60% of patients with sudden onset arrhythmia develop the psychological symptoms of panic disorder. So sudden onset arrhythmia means your heart is not consistent, and then you develop panic disorder. So you start panicking.
So the two are connected.
Exactly.
Your physical and your emotional are connected.
Exactly. And so what's happening with this cortisol is that the heart rate, the heart rhythm, what's called heart coherence is not very high. It's not consistent because of stress, and it leads to this perpetuating cycle of more and more cortisol, and we essentially are making ourselves toxic from the inside out.
Okay, so what does the future look like, Mark?
Well, our way of coping is just so fundamentally important for dealing with the current moment. And from Lazarus and Folkman, those are the guys that look at this model of stress that we looked at earlier. They talk about two ways of coping: adaptive coping, something that's helpful that leads to a future state where things are kind of okay, and maladaptive coping, where we try and kind of deal with the current threat. And that leads to a long-term position that really is a bit of a downward
So
spiral.
to summarize, generally speaking, if you try and cope with it by only dealing with the current threat, there's a good chance it's an unhelpful way of dealing with it. Just eating that tub of Ben & Jerry's, just watching another 6 episodes of Netflix, making you pick up weight and not sleep, etc., etc. And it goes, the spiral goes down. But if we can imagine where we want to be, who do we want to be at the end of this? And if we can work towards that, there may be short-term pain, but a long-term gain.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
So what do you foresee, in your professional opinion, with the future of work, with the dynamics we're seeing? Where are we going here?
Well, I mean, it's no news to any of us. There's massive shifts happening in the world of work. Technology's shifting. The way leaders interact with people are shifting. Just the generations coming into the work environment, the balance there is shifting. Even just the way we work remotely, work-life balance, I think is a historical story because now they are in the same place. So there's a lot of shifts happening, and I think what's going to be key in this new world is for us to be able to harness the psychological muscles, resources, if you like, that can help us to be effective in this new world.
I've actually got the perfect analogy here. This word, the New World, I don't know if you know, but it actually comes from around this whole idea of discovering the Americas, journeying to the New World. Old world being Europe, New World being, these amazing new lands flowing with milk and honey that everyone was discovering. Now, in the old world, the place you left, there were established social systems, legal systems. You understood how society worked. You knew what would happen if you broke the law, and everything was worked out for you. Then you get to the New World, and it is full of all sorts of different and new opportunities. But now you have to plant your own food and build your own house if you're one of those early explorers. All sorts of skills you didn't need before, which now you need. And there's all sorts of dangers which you're not used to. A bow and arrow, if you're talking about America. Wild animals that just don't form part of the European context, now you have to deal with. And in this new and exciting land of opportunity, there are new dangers, but they require new skills. So in this, to jump out of the analogy back to the current moment, back to the future we're looking towards, what skills do we need? What are the tools we need that we didn't need in the past in quite the same way, but that the future demands of us?
Well, interestingly, along with some of these shifts that we were talking about, technology shifts, leadership, generational cohorts, has been a shift in focus for what humans need to add value in the world of work. And the shift has been one a little bit away from technical skill and more towards social and emotional competencies that lie in the domain of emotional intelligence. And I see what you've got up here is that EQI 2.0 model of emotional intelligence. Very interesting that many people, are familiar with certain models of EQ. This particular one we like here at my group is it's got these 5 different kind of realms, one of which we've touched on today, the stress management realm. And I think it's just a helpful way of understanding this set of psychosocial muscles that make us great at managing ourselves and interacting with others. I think what will help us to manage in the new world.
So, as you can see, we've obviously dealt with stress today. Sort of snuck it in there without you realizing we were talking about an emotional intelligence competency, the ability to handle stress. We all want to be able to handle stress, don't we? The thing is, it's maladaptive to expect that we can just do it right now without developing skills. They're like muscles, emotional muscles. And if we can have this future focus and we can take ourselves on a journey of growing the skills and the competencies and the tools that we need for this new world, then in the future we can actually be someone different. We can have different teams. We can have a different context internally than what we're having right now. But it's not going to happen right now. The best time to develop your EQ would have been 3 years ago. A year and a half ago when we first started out with these webinars, we said now's the time. That would have been the second best time. Now is the third best time. And in fact, now is all we've got. So now is the best time. So over the next 4 sessions of this series, we're going to be looking at a different slice of this model each week and seeing how it applies to the mental health moment that we're in. Any final words from you, or can I say goodbye?
I just think it's going to be such a great journey over these next 4 or 5 weeks, and just some of the tools that will be made available to the listeners, I think are going to be powerful.
There are resources available. You can see them on the landing page. Each episode will come with different resources to help you. And of course, don't forget to check out mygrow.me to find out more about how we can help you develop some of these skills. Until next time, keep well.